Hey guys, it's Drake, and I'm here to make a Christmas book haul. So these are books that I've been getting over the last month or so, and I figured I'd make a video just showing some stuff I got for myself for Christmas. Um, so I kind of have two stacks here. This stack I'm going to do first. It's fiction, poetry, different stuff like that, and then this stack is my different stuff related to linguistics that I've been into. So we're going to start with this stack here. So this first one, Stardust Media. I don't have high hopes for it. The main reason I got it is because it has a Whistler painting on the front, the Nocturne in black and gold. So yeah, that's the main reason. But this author doesn't seem too bad. Christina Pugh, I guess. She won a prize for some of these things, and yeah, I mean, I don't know how to make a website, even though I'm not that old. It's kind of like conversational, kind of low-level contemporary stuff, which I normally don't go for, but we'll see. Maybe it's interesting. It was just like got this from those library bookstores that sell everything super cheap. This is like $1, so worst thing that can happen is I don't like it and I spent $1. So that's number one there. And then this next one I'm pretty pleased with. So this one I've been meaning to get for a while and just put it off, and then finally I decided to get it. So this here is a 2-volume work, The Poetry of Giles and Phineas Fletcher. I never know how to say that name, Giles or Giles, but Giles just sounds stupid, so I say Giles. Giles and Phineas Fletcher, the poetical works. So they were brothers. They came just after Shakespeare, so they wrote most of their works between the 1620s and 1630s. I think they both went to Cambridge, but either way, Phineas Fletcher. The main reason I got these books, which came as a set, is because Phineas Fletcher wrote a long poem called The Purple Island. And the first time I heard about the Purple Island was from looking into James Joyce. And it was related to Finnegan's Wake when I first heard about it, because James Joyce was thinking about Finnegan's Wake. One of the structural, structural methods of designing the book was around the anatomy of the human body. And he said that it was in the tradition of Phineas Fletcher with The Purple Island, which does a similar thing, where it goes, part by part in the human body, the head, the heart, and so on. And Phineas Fletcher was heavily influenced by Edmund Spenser, the Fairy Queen. And there's another poem from this time, Gondibert, by William Davenant. And I just really love this time in literature. Of course, going from Philip Sidney, Shakespeare, John Donne, Phineas Fletcher, then going through the Restoration period, of course, getting up to Milton and so on. And so, just inching away, getting more and more of these works. And another thing that's really interesting about these copies in particular, where, as you can tell, they're library copies by the writing on the side, and they came from the Los Angeles Public Library. And I don't know when they were put in the library, but these books are from 1908. So they must have been, put in there quite long ago. And whenever I saw that they were from the Los Angeles Public Library, it just kind of struck my imagination. And I thought of this story. It kind of fits in with a couple of other things I've been planning of someone, back in, let's say, the 1950s, running across these exact copies in the Los Angeles Public Library before they discard them. And just trying to imagine the sort of person that would, be, let's say, 20, 30 years old in Los Angeles in the 1950s, coming across the poetical works of Giles and Phineas Fletcher. So that was kind of nice to think about, I guess, as a flight of fancy. But so that's there. Oh, and another thing to highlight with these, they're edited by a guy named F.S. Boas, Frederick Boas, and he's really known, and someone who I talked to about this time period let me know that he wrote one of the master studies of Christopher Marlowe, and I also found out that his last work he put out was a study of Philip Sidney. He's also well known for collecting the works of Thomas Kidd, and then of course he does Giles and Phineas Fletcher. So if you're interested in this time period and you're not familiar with F.S. Boas and with publishing with Cambridge University Press mainly, go ahead and check him out. So that's that there. And then here is one that is relatively rare, Zulus by Percival Everett. Now he's quite a well-known author now, I would say, one of the more relevant contemporary writers. But this book is one of his early books. It came out in 1990, and I think by this time he had only published a couple books. The Permanent Press, which I had never heard of. It's kind of an interesting picture, him with a couple horses. What a name though, Percival Everett. And so you kind of see what the book's about from the front cover, but this is like an early dystopian themed novel, but it has an interesting twist because Percival Everett, if you've ever looked into him, pretty sharp guy, and this is a satirical novel. The overarching story is that the main character, Alice Achitophel, a 300-pound government clerk and misfit, has a well-kept secret that she is perhaps the last woman alive who is not sterile. As such, she poses a threat to the government and is coveted by rebels. So it's just kind of like a fun story, I guess. But the real thing I'm interested in with the book is his satire, because I've read a couple things he said, and I seem to get along with his mindset on a lot of things, especially related to literature. So I just think it'd be nice to see what he thought about things back in 1990. And then this would be my first book of his. So if I like this one, I'll continue reading his stuff. But I was also quite lucky. Just as a little treat, it's a signed copy. So I would say, though, if this book sounds interesting, go ahead and buy a copy pretty quick, because just from checking when I bought this, I think there were only 3 other copies online. So if it sounds interesting, go ahead and pick up a copy. So Zulus by Percival Everett. And then another contemporary author that I've been looking into is Michael J. Seidlinger. And this one was one of his earlier books, published in 2010 by Civil Coping Mechanisms. It's kind of a smaller independent press, which I think he was affiliated with. I think he was either the editor or helped found it or something. I didn't really go into too much detail with it, but something like that. But the thing that stuck out for me with this book is the title, The Day We Delay. Just kind of an interesting title. It's kind of rare to find a good title, and this one struck me as a good title. And then when I looked into the author, it seems like kind of more my direction that I'm interested in as far as contemporary writing, more satirical, critical writing that has a strong narrative or prose style. And this one fit that. And as you can see from some of the blurbs on the back, if you're interested in reading those, other people who talked about it, Yeah, and just real quick too, that it was in 2010 because I was born in the mid 90s. So by the time 2010 rolled around, I was in high school. And I remember the 2008 like financial crisis and everything, but I was still pretty young. So I'm interested in seeing people who are about 10 years older than me, who were born in the early to mid 80s, kind of how that hit them, because the United States has been going through some pretty serious economic stagnation. The internet revolution and stuff, whatever, from the 90s to present has kind of covered things up, where that made it less obvious what's actually going on. But then with things like the 2008 crisis and then COVID, I think it's becoming more and more uh, impossible to ignore what's actually going on. So it's just interesting to see, for me, people who are a little older than myself, what they were thinking in a time where I wasn't really able to see what was going on and see how things were going. Another reason I love reading history, but more contemporary history, I guess, is the way I think about this. And hopefully he's good, because I have a really hard time finding good contemporary writers, and I really feel like I spend a lot of time looking for them, and it's always nice when I find a good one, like Evan Dara, for example, has been the most standout. Evan Dara, as far as novelist, is my standout for contemporary writers, and then for poets in English, Daniel Popick. Daniel Popick, I'd say, is pretty exceptional for the time, for our time. And then the last fiction / poetry that I found at a local used bookstore is, I think it's Voss. I'd say like Voss, an opera in Flatland. And this one I've seen go around a little bit. I read the Book of Portraiture, must be 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, and I have to say it wasn't my favorite. It did some interesting things, but I don't usually go for this sort of like typographical experimentation, like House of Leaves style stuff. And as you can see just from me flipping through, you have photographs and typography. I mean, I can get along with some of it, like the 5 meters of poems and E. Cummings, that sort of thing. But really, my focus is always for the language rather than the formatting. So I was kind of hesitant to get into this. And after the Book of Portraiture, I kind of said, oh, well, I'm not really interested in the writer. But several people that I talk to, or that I, keep an eye out for their recommendations, they said, oh, Voss is pretty good. And so I figured, screw it. Found it for a cheap price at a local bookstore. Might as well check it out again. So went ahead and got it. So we'll see. We'll see if I like this one. I think it's at least an interesting idea. He's an interesting writer. He tries to do something new. And there was an interview with him, or a talk. It was more appropriately called a talk. He did answer some questions. And, I kind of like the way he talked about writing, so figured I'd give him another shot. So that's Voss, an opera in Flatland. Yeah, Vass, that would not be good, Voss. All right, so then now that's the fiction and stuff done. Now getting back to one of my more recent interests, I'd say in the last 2 years or so, I've kind of fallen down the rabbit hole with linguistics and languages, and especially Old English, which I've had a long love for. And this one was partially spurred on by traveling through stories. He has an excellent channel. I really love his videos where he talks about Old English and is interested in Old Norse and the older languages. He also likes contemporary Icelandic literature and reads pretty deeply in contemporary translated literature. I'll go ahead and put a link to his channel in this description of this video, but check him out if you haven't already. But long way of saying, he mentioned this book recently in a bookshelf tour he has of my main interest in looking at the bookshelf tours is Anglo-Saxon stuff and Old Norse stuff and different languages, Norman French and things. And I had already known about this book for a while, and I just didn't get it because it's always so expensive, and I wanted to get a newer edition, and so on and so on. But when he made that video, I was just, all right, screw it. I'm gonna go ahead and get it. I've been wanting it forever. I've already read Beowulf in the translation done by actually this guy, Robert Bjork, for the Dumbarton Oaks Harvard series. And that's a prose translation with the facing Old English on the side. This one has about 140 pages of, or I guess more, 170 something pages of introductory material, and then it has the Old English only. So this is kind of a step up from where I'm at. And I've already read some of the introductory material, and it's just excellent. I love how concise it is, because I don't really like reading a whole lot of literary criticism, I like literary history quite a lot, but the criticism really can tire me out really quickly. But Kleber, he was one of those classic, German philology types, just perfect. Just always a joy to read. So, highly recommended if you're into Old English, if you're into Old Norse, Beowulf, Anglo-Saxon poetry. If you just love poetry, love literature, I would recommend getting this. So that's that one. And then also connected, I've been trying to find a good introductory kind of textbook sort of thing for Old English. And I know there are quite a few out there, but I was kind of holding out for one that struck me as being interesting in some way, or touching on another one of my books that I found. I was trying to get a hold of the R.D. Folk, who's also, as you can see at the top there, he also does translations and writes a lot of stuff about Old English. But his was published in a really small print run by the Arizona University Press. They're, I think it's called like Medieval Renaissance something series, whatever. It's like some acronym. But they do exceptionally small print runs of anything they do. So it was sold out and $150. I'm not going to spend $150 for something when there are, a plethora of other choices. And I believe the Traveling Through Stories, he had recommended one. I think it was the Peter S. Baker one, which, I thought, sure, I might get that. But then I saw that the MLA, the Modern Language Association, put out one, and they have a really good series on like medieval languages, medieval European languages. The other one I have of theirs is an Introduction to Old Occitan by William Payden, and that one's just excellent. I mean, I haven't delved into it too deeply, kind of just skimmed it. I have his translation of the Poetry of Bertrand de Born as well, so I knew it was going to be top tier. But that's what really got me interested in this one, and it was kind of a newer, what would you say, newer example of an Old English textbook. So figured I'd give it a shot. Pretty substantial, about 700-800 pages. And I like how it's set up, where they give you a lesson on something filled with notes, and then they'll give you, not sure if it'll show you an example, but it'll give you a piece of actual Old English to read, to practice with it. And then in the very back, it has several selections of Old English with glossary and mentions dialects, which I'm especially interested in. That's why I wanted to get the R.D. Folk Introduction to Old English, or Introductory Grammar to Old English, I think it was called, because he specifically talked about different dialects for Old English. And that's what I was really interested in, because I think it's kind of fascinating how, we think, oh, it's Old English. But then that was the Wessex main Alfred the Great, and so on. But then there were other completely different dialects of the same language. Like today, of course, we have different dialects of English depending on where you live and how close you are to urban areas and rural areas and so on. So anyway, got this. Don't want to go on too much longer for this video, but apart from Indo-European languages, which is my main interest that I've been getting into, I wanted to branch out to see other language groups. And I was debating between the main ones I was choosing from were native North American languages, Bantu languages, or Sino-Tibetan. Also Austronesian, but Austronesian seems like a pretty high learning curve, especially with my lack of knowledge about the history of that region, which was going to be one of the main things holding me back. So I decided, since I live in America, I do have very distant Cherokee ancestry on one side of my family, and also just Native American languages are just so fascinating, and I barely knew anything about them. I only knew a little bit, listened to some powwow music and very little things, looking into Nahuatl, different languages here and there, but I decided to go ahead and dive in. This seemed like one of the best ones. Cambridge Language Surveys is awesome. This lady seems like one of the major scholars in the field, and pretty much one of the main ways I've been finding books lately is by going on Wikipedia and just not even reading any of the article, basically, just going straight to the bottom to see further reading, references, or notes. And then they'll usually give you like a list of books depending on the article. And if you pick the right article, of course, I'm not picking like, some random BS article, but if you go to some article on like, Powhatan language or Arapaho language or Shoshone or something like that, you're not going to get some random goofball. You're going to get people who actually know what's going on, which I'm extremely grateful for, because that's how I found this. I kept seeing this survey show up on all these different Wikipedia articles. And so I went ahead and got it, found it for a cheap price. Was waiting for a while, actually. Waited for this for about 6 months or so before I found it for a reasonable price, because I feel like, I don't usually get too conspiratorial, but I feel like there's some international conspiracy trying to keep people from learning linguistics, because every single goddamn book is at least $50, if not $100, if not $200. And, I'm still trying to figure out exactly who's leading the conspiracy. It's a little tricky, but there's almost certainly a conspiracy trying to prevent people from learning languages. Of course I'm joking, just nobody cares about it, which is the main conspiracy, which is a massive shame. And anyway, yeah, so this is tons of information. So it goes different language families in the last half of the book, and then the first half has different, so that's the catalog of languages right there, part 2. This first part, and here's a fascinating section that I was reading. Plains Sign Talk. Because the languages in North America, this is my understanding, because the languages were so different, and especially nomadic groups encountered so many different people, so many different languages, they developed a type of sign language that they used that apparently predated European contact. And so I was interested in finding, well, then how did sign language become developed? Because we have American Sign Language, ASL. Was that developed by someone who saw a Native American doing their sign language and then, oh, that's a good idea? I just think that's so fascinating. I need to do more research into it. But it was treated as a lingua franca until English came in, and English replaced it as a lingua franca. Also, talking about puns, Native American puns. This one's kind of funny. If you want to pause the video, you can go ahead and read that there. A pun between I said dog and I ate excrement. But yeah, so just fascinating stuff. Another interesting idea I got from this is that they had, right here in this section too, narrative language, where it was a common men and women's language, different languages there. But for the narrative language and ceremonial language, it was common to have different dialects or different speech patterns. You might add a lisp to a different character in a story you're telling, but it was relatively stable across groups depending on the character. So you might have, as well known, you might have the trickster. And for the trickster, you'll include more cursing and more grammar mistakes, and you might include a lisp or something like that to signify that it's a different way of speaking for the trickster as opposed to, the hero of the story or whatever it might be. I'm just pulling a random example out. It might not even be accurate, but just to give you an idea. And I was thinking, wouldn't that have been fascinating to hear Homer's voice for Achilles, or Homer's voice for Hector, or Homer's voice for Odysseus, assuming that he was originally an orator that, just happened to write things down, or, got credit for writing things down. It must have been that way. It must have been that way. And I just think that'd be a fascinating, of course we're never going to know, but man, just imagine being able to hear Homer recite the Iliad or the Odyssey. But anyway, so that's my Christmas book haul. Some books I got in about the last month or so. So let me know if you thought any of that was interesting. Also, feel free to let me know. I'd be interested to see what you guys got. In my Discord, we've been spamming the chat with our Christmas stacks. So feel free to hop in there and throw up a picture if you want to, or leave it in the comments. Yeah, hope you guys have been doing well. Death is a gang boss.